Welcome to the Lighthouse Leadership Podcast, the show where we explore the simple frameworks that help turn managers into great leaders and teams into high performers. I'm your host, Evan Hickok, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the lessons, stories, and strategies that help leaders like you navigate the toughest challenges, building a team that delivers on the promise of your project. Now, this first episode is all about why so many projects and managers fail, and more importantly, how to fix it. Let's dive in. Welcome to the first episode of the Lighthouse Leadership Podcast. I want to talk a little bit about why this podcast exists, why I started this. This takes a lot of energy. About 10 years ago, I moved over from being a great engineering leader on an amazing team. I got asked to turn around a team, which they estimated would take me 6 weeks. I was there for 7 months and I was unsuccessful. That project was never able to turn around. And the question I've been asking ever since is, what's the difference between these two teams and what might I have changed in my approach? So I found the answer, and this podcast is here to share the answer with you. But first I want to give you 3 statistics to keep in mind. Here's the first statistic. Only 8.5% of projects finish on budget and on time. This statistic is in Bent Flyvbjerg's book called How Big Things Get Done. It's an amazing book that talks about how you build a plan and how you execute a plan. Wonderful book. He's got a database of 16,000 projects in it. And that's where he's able to pull out this 8.5% of projects finish on budget and on time. And it's actually shocking because there's a third element, of course. Talks about cost and schedule. I think it doesn't talk about his benefits. Only 0.5% of all projects, as he says, finish on budget, on time, and on benefits. So these ones that finish on budget and on time, these 8.5%, they don't necessarily also give the promise of the project. Here's the second statistic. 60% of managers fail within their first 24 months. This is in Forbes magazine. It's a shocking number. 60% of managers fail in their first 24 months. That's certainly how I felt when I was trying to turn around this team. I felt like a failure when I left that project. I left before the project completed. I pulled a parachute. I called people. I said, you got to get me out of here. That wasn't only me. The people that I called to say, you got to get me out of here, also didn't give me the resources that they promised. I never got the software engineer I promised in 7 months. So they promised me a software engineer. They never gave it. But we'll talk about that story some other day. But 60% of managers fail within their first 24 months, and I certainly felt that way. And here's the third statistic. 86% of managers never receive foundational training. They're called accidental managers. This is a poll that was published by People Management Magazine, a human resources publication in the United Kingdom. So I think there's a correlation between those numbers. 86% of managers never receive foundational training. 60% of managers fail within their first 24 months, and only 8.5% of projects finish on budget and on time. Only 0.5% of projects finish on time, on budget, and on benefits. There's a correlation. So what's the antidote to this? This is what I offer. The antidote first is a shift in mindset. When you start leading a team, you need to make a transition from being an individual contributor to being a leader. The 86% of you who have never received that foundational training, what that training would do is tap you on the shoulder and say, hey, you need to make a shift. Here's how. And part of the problem is your senior manager, the manager above you, also came out of that 86% of people who didn't receive training. They're in the 40% that did not fail in the first 24 months, I hope. They were able to get by on natural abilities, and some of them are really amazing. But the senior manager's job should be to train the manager. That's really what it should be, to build a great manager. But without the foundational training at the senior manager level, they also cannot do their job. But look, there's still time. You can be a manager, a team leader of any kind. You could be a senior manager. There's still time. Here's the key. Write this down. Leaders are made. They are not born. Leaders are made. They are not born. I am proof of that. You are going to be proof of that. So what's a leader? Well, let's get some fundamental ideas out of the way. I'm going to give you a few definitions. I build on all of this throughout this podcast. So the first is a team. What's the definition of a team? I hope you have your pencil out. A team is a bounded, stable group of people, interdependent on achieving a shared goal. A bounded, stable group of people, interdependent on achieving a shared goal. We're going to unpack that. Okay, so what is management? Management, this is the role responsible for delivering the desired results of an organization or team. How do you measure the output of a manager? The output of a manager is the output of the team that they supervise or influence. Now that comes from a book called High Output Management by Andy Grove. Andy Grove was the founding president of Intel. His book's amazing, and I've saving you some time by extracting some of the most important points from there. So that's what the management is, right? So we've just defined what a team is, what management means, the role responsible for delivering the desired results of an organization or a team. And the output of a manager is equal to the output of the team they supervise or influence. Okay, I have two more definitions. The next definition is a project. And I pull the definition of a project from the Project Management Institute, or PMI. A project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. It has a specific objective, a defined start and end date, and it employs human and non-human resources. Those are important: an objective, a defined start and end date, and employs human and non-human resources. So it says, here's the objective, here's the thing you're delivering, here's the start and end date, here's the schedule required, and of the non-human resources is money or some sort of capital. Okay, now what's a leader? Right, I've been obsessed with this question. What's the difference between leadership and management? And I found a really compelling answer, but let's just start with the definition. This is my favorite definition of a leader. This is from Seth Godin. Seth says, leaders create things that didn't exist before. They do this by giving the tribe a vision of something that could happen, but hasn't happened yet. So if I could connect these four definitions, the leader defines the project. The leader is the one who's saying, here's the objective, here's the start and end date. That's what leadership is: setting direction and creating meaningful work. That project is executed by the team. The team is the bounded, stable group of people independent on achieving a shared goal. The shared goal are the objectives in the project. And the team is enabled by the manager. The manager is a role responsible for delivering the desired results of the organization or the team. The output of the manager is equal to the output of the team they supervise or influence. So there's four very important foundational definitions that I know will help you improve already. I just wish I knew this 10 years ago. I wish I knew this 20 years ago. I am here to save you time. So here's a simple concept to illustrate this idea of management, right? Measuring the output of a manager by measuring the output of a team. It's a pizza shop, right? The manager's job of the pizza shop is to get the pizza to the customers, right? You got to run this whole crew of people. There's people making pizzas. There's people making dough. There's people making sauce. There's people assembling orders. There's people taking orders. There's people waiting tables, right? The manager is orchestrating all those things to happen, and the output of the manager is the output of that team. It's the output of it's the sum of the outputs of the individuals of the team. Some members will cancel each other out. You want the strength of one person to cancel out the weakness of another. Hopefully strengths aren't canceling out strengths. That happens too, just something you got to manage. But that's kind of the key element here. And so the manager is establishing the environment that enables this team. Remember, the team is the bounded, stable group of people interdependent on achieving a shared goal. The shared goal is, nailing this dinner rush, right, in the pizza shop. There's interdependence between the people. The person making the pizza can't make the pizza without the dough. The person making the dough has no meaning without it being assembled into a pizza. The person making the pizza doesn't know what to make without somebody taking an order, right? This is the essence of interdependence. And interdependence exists on teams with hardware and software and teams with AI. Interdependence is one of the key components of a team. And the manager's job is to help orchestrate that interdependence so that the team gives an output that was established by leader. And I should probably mention, management and leadership there are two ways of thinking. They're not two different roles. They don't have to be two different roles. Some people are stronger leaders than they are managers. Some people are stronger managers than they are leaders. But every endeavor needs both. And they are two different types of thinking. So I find it helpful to think of that as two types of thinking and switching between them. Here's a simple example. Leadership is setting the family agenda that the children are going to learn how to swim. Bring it back to that wonderful Seth Godin definition. Leaders create things that didn't exist before. They do this by giving the tribe a vision of something that could happen but hasn't happened yet. We are picturing a family that swims. I don't know how to swim. I've not yet learned how to swim. I'm making sure my children learn how to swim. It's an important life skill. Not only is it fun, I see a lot of people really, really enjoying this, but it's really important for safety. So we're establishing this as a vision of the future where the children are strong swimmers. That is me using my leader brain. Me using my management brain is ensuring that we get to lessons. What are the things that need to happen? All their stuff needs to be in the right place. They need to be dressed on time. We need to be in the car on time. Leadership is setting the direction. Management is executing towards the direction. That's why leadership thinking is establishing the project. Management thinking is executing the project. And the team is the group that executes the project. My kids and I are a team in executing this swimming project. They're too young to get to the pool without me. If the kids don't go to the pool that day, if we skip, as a manager, my output has been 0 that day because we didn't get to the pool. So I'd like to borrow an idea now from NFL Hall of Fame coach Bill Parcells, who wrote an article in HBR in 2000 called The Tough Work of Turning Around a Team. So Parcells, for those who don't know, Parcells won the Super Bowl, I think 3 times. And he turned around 3 teams from worst to first, including the New York Giants, the New England Patriots, and the New York Jets. So he's got quite a bit of credibility. And one of the things actually he describes is, how vulnerable he felt and the imposter syndrome that he felt with his very first team that he was coaching in 1983, because he's this little guy and he's in a locker room full of absolute giants. These guys are millionaires. They're on the cover of, the local papers, national sports magazines. They're getting interviewed all over the place. And he's the one who's got to tell them what to do. Does that sound familiar? Anybody out there leading a team with people who are much smarter than you? You're very lucky. And the thing that Parcells says, in order to get results from that team, you've got to impose your leadership. Impose your leadership. What does that even mean, right? Where would you start? So I read this and I remember saying, where do I start? And the thing that I found is that there's actually only 4 things you need to do. So I'm going to explore this first by looking at the cause of poor performance. So imagine you've seen metaphors many times of tips of icebergs and the stuff underneath the iceberg, right? So picture in your mind an iceberg, and at the top of it is generally poor performance. Your team is underperforming. They're missing deadlines. They're not delivering on the promise of their projects. They're not delivering on the promise of their action items. There's unresolvable conflict. So I've found that there's actually only 4 things underneath this iceberg that are causing this underperformance. So here are the 4 things. Write this down. The first is misalignment. Misalignment is when teams don't share the same picture of the future they are striving towards. Now, go back to the definition of a team. A bounded, stable group of people interdependent on achieving a shared goal. So misalignment is when they don't have the same picture in their mind of what that shared goal is. Now, that shared goal is the objective of the project, which is defined by the leader. I see this missed all the time. Alignment is a predecessor to empowering the team. You have to say where we're going before you say go. You don't always, you would never get in your car and start driving somewhere without a destination in mind. But we kick off teams without giving them a clear picture of the destination all the time. We need to fix that. That's the first problem. The second problem are broken or missing processes. This was one of the key components in that team I failed to turn around. They had no to-do list. I created a to-do list so when I arrived to that team, I asked them how I could help. They said, the response from the project manager was, I don't even know why you're here. I said, well, you've not conducted this financial review for 3 months. Why don't I take that off your hands? What are the hard bits? Can you give me like 3 hard problems? So he named 3 hard problems. I went, I pulled together this financial review, gave the presentation as represented the project as best as I could in, my first 4 hours. The leadership were very interested to hear these top 3 problems, and they provided some ideas, some resources. They said, well, we can fund this, or we know some other people over here who might be able to support with that. So I was very excited. I came back to Bob, the project manager, and I said, Bob, I think I've got some resources on those 3 top problems that you gave me. Let's start to tackle them. And he said, we've already solved them. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, we finished them before lunch. I said, oh, okay. Well, I wasn't looking for your pre-lunch to-do list. I was looking for what are the actual hard problems? And he reiterated, I don't even know why you're here. So that's a problem with process. If your to-dos are being tracked haphazardly, it makes prioritization impossible. This is where results end up coming from individual effort than a team contribution. And so what I did was I built the best tool I could kind of kludge together to track the to-dos of the team. When I arrived on day 0, they had 0 problems written down, 0 actions written down anywhere. When I left, there were 285 things written down, and some of those are really hard. This is a very complex system that we're trying to get working, and some of those are rather hard. I'll unpack that in a future episode. But the second thing I see are broken or missing processes. The third is called psychological danger. This is the opposite of psychological safety. After I describe these 4 underlying problems, we'll talk about the 4 underlying principles that you need to impose your leadership, to confidently impose your leadership and develop a great team. So psychological danger is a big problem. This is what happens when people feel sharing their ideas may result in personal harm, or they might be futile because they don't feel heard. So Albert Einstein says, if an idea does not first seem crazy, then it has no chance, right? The thing that he's saying is the most innovative ideas sound crazy. And I don't know about you, but I've certainly felt myself in a room with an idea that I'm afraid to voice because it feels so in left field compared to what's being described. And I'm always wondering, am I right or am I ahead? I'm always wondering, am I wrong or am I ahead? And it takes courage to actually state that idea. And if somebody's going to ignore it or make you feel stupid for sharing it, then you're certainly not going to share it next time. And that's the idea of psychological danger. Psychological danger is not always overt. You can't always see the cliff that people feel that they're standing on, or, the pit of fire beneath their feet. You can't see it because people just don't share their ideas, and you can't see what's in somebody's head. So psychological danger is a big problem. That's when you get limited to the project gets limited to your ideas instead of the ideas of the team. And if you're going to limit the team's output to your ideas, what do you need a team for? What are you paying all these people for? You need their ideas. It's a great quote from Steve Jobs. He says something like, "We hire smart people and then we tell them what to do." That's backwards. We need to hire smart people and let them tell us what to do. But they won't tell us without psychological safety. And then the last is lack of cohesion. There's relationships are missing, and people always blame the other guys, the people that they don't actually know. I remember when I started my career over 20 years ago, I was in a rotational development program, and I had worked in a quality organization. I'd worked in a manufacturing organization. I worked in a sourcing organization or supply chain, and I was working in a field organization. And so I had the benefit of having in quality organization. Well, I had the benefit of having worked in supply chain, and I was buying things. And then I moved to manufacturing, where I built the things that I bought. And then I moved to quality, where I checked the quality of the work of the things that I built and bought. And then I moved to field engineering, where I was installing the same things that I bought, built, and checked. And we found that there was an issue that when we were installing, and the immediate response was, "Oh, those guys don't know what they're doing." And I said, I actually know the guy who built this. Maybe there's a trick. So I went and I grabbed him. I went down to the manufacturing floor and I grabbed him. His name is Pat. I said, "Hey, Pat, you built these things. Can you come help us understand it?" And he came up, and in about 10 minutes, everybody knew how to install this thing. There was just a trick. But the first response was to blame the guy they didn't know. Blame the other group. This isn't a me problem. This is a them problem. And this happens when you don't have relationships. I solved that problem in 10 minutes with relationships. So relationships are an absolutely essential to a team to getting things done. And so obviously the antidote to these four bottom of the iceberg issues is to apply these the opposite of these four problems. So when you take this role, you take this management role, you take this team leadership role, and now you apply the Bill Parcells recommendation to impose your leadership. This is what you're imposing. These four things. Write this down. So the first one is getting aligned on a common goal. The objective of a project, which is defined by a leader. We haven't talked about management yet, but you need to be aligned on a common goal. You need transparent processes that enable focus and execution. That's the second thing. Write that down. Transparent processes that enable focus and execution. Think of that team I was describing that had 0 to-dos. What are they going to focus on? They don't know. You need to focus on your highest priority item, but you cannot prioritize what you have not documented. Transparent processes enable focus and execution. The to-dos is not the only type of process you need. There's 3 types of processes. There's routine processes, complex processes, and creative processes. We'll get to that in a future episode. So the opposite of psychological danger is number 3. This is psychological safety. So when people feel like they're in psychological danger, they, as we've established, they hide what they know to protect themselves because they feel they're damaged. They feel they are vulnerable to being exposed as a fool or being ignored or have an idea that's too innovative that feels different and is just ostracized. So the opposite of that is psychological safety. When a group feels psychological safety, they actually share their ideas to protect the group. They share their ideas to protect the group. When there's psychological danger, they hide their ideas to protect themselves. When there's psychological safety, they share their ideas to protect the group. The group that they have relationships with, that they feel interdependence with on achieving this shared goal. That's been established by the leader, which they all understand because it's in the project specification or the project charter as an objective. They all want to do this thing. And the last is cohesion, right? A cohesive team is a team that knows each other. right? Think of that simple example I gave about, moving from, manufacturing over to field engineering. And in field, when we're installing this product, the guy immediately says, those guys don't know how to build this. The truth was, he did not know how to install it. He needed to collaborate with somebody that he did not know, but I knew. And I was able to pull that third person in, and that third person was able to teach everybody in 10 minutes how this worked. That 10 minutes was important. It might have taken Pat 2 hours to figure out how to do it. And then it solved it for the rest of us in 10 minutes. Relationships are really important, and a cohesive team is key. So if you've enjoyed this episode and want to dive deeper into simple frameworks that help managers lead high-performing teams, subscribe to this podcast. And if you want even more actionable leadership insights, sign up for the Lighthouse Leadership newsletter. Go to evanhickok.com, EvanHickok.com. I publish every Sunday. I share concise frameworks and stories to help you become the leader your team deserves. Ciao. See you next time.